Edwards-Dashti, Students Stop the War, SOAS, involved in the student protests.
Good afternoon, friends, students, activists. Thank you to the conference conveners for organising this important event, and thank you for inviting me to speak for the student body. What students are doing today is very significant. We are becoming a voice to be reckoned with, a voice that must be heard, and a voice which governments across the world must engage with and listen to. It was the kids in the square that became the force which mobilised Egypt's people and changed the course of Egypt's history. If any government, including our own, thinks that students' voices can be ignored or silenced, look what is happening in the world, from Tunisia to Egypt to Bahrain. In world affairs, it is students who have taken a lead in the anti-war movement, in troops out of Afghanistan. Students have taken a lead in Stop the War against the war in Iraq, infamously called Operation Iraqi Freedom, in an attempt to con the world and American people and America's allies into supporting it. It is the worldwide student movement that has taken an active part in the struggle against the bombing and murder of civilians of the population of Gaza. Who was it who opposed the arm of the state in China's Tiananmen Square? The students. Who was it who resisted the Shah of Iran before the Iranian Revolution? The students. Who was it in May 1968 in France who wanted to shake up old society, focusing especially on education and especially on employment? The students. And who was it in Cairo in February 2011 who toppled Mubarak, one of the biggest dictatorships who ruled for 30 years with the support of the West and America? It was the students, the kids in the square. Democracy and the struggle of a free and truly inclusive world depends on students. Resistance to oppressive states and the courage to challenge the status quo depends on a student body that asks questions. Frantz Fanon, a great anti-colonial critic and freedom fighter in the fight of Algeria for independence from the French, had these words etched on his gravestone. Let me always be a man that asks questions. There is no questioning without an education which encourages students to engage with ideas. In Britain, higher education is being cut. Ideas are being cut. Critical thinking is being cut, and cut again. Students are taking an active role in imposing the cuts in education for the future, not only of themselves, but for students coming into education in the next few years. Cuts to the universities are bleeding dry the social sciences and the humanities, those very subjects within education which are about ideas. And there are cuts in universities to teaching budgets, and there are cuts in student funding. This student movement has been the biggest student movement in British history. Why? Because nowhere in history have young people, the nation's future, been sacrificed in this way. We have witnessed the immense sting of university occupations. SOAS, Manchester, Leeds, Bristol, UCL, just to name a few. Direct actions like sit-ins, flash mobs, and thousands of students have taken to the streets. We have hugely embarrassed the government, hugely embarrassed David Cameron, and hugely embarrassed Nick Clegg. Both of you should hang your heads in shame. They have lied to us, and they still lie. The government today has not honoured its promise. This is the government that we did not elect. I did not vote for these policies, and you did not vote for these policies. Yet students are being forced to pay the price. Provisions for students are worse than they have ever been. After World War II, we needed a welfare state. We needed reconstruction. It was manifestly apparent that the revival of the country on its knees depended on social revision and economic reform. And our forefathers and mothers' vision was that education would provide equality and social mobility. But where is education now? Where is social mobility now? Where is equality now? And there are not only cuts to higher education and to particular courses. There are cuts to provision in school. I speak of a new endangered species, a species that are being culled and being bled. This is not the seals of Alaska or the lions of Africa or even the penguins of Antarctica. I speak to you about the endangered species one more assault on education. The abolition of the Education Maintenance Awards, or EMA, by the government is yet another nail in the coffin of higher education. The rise in tuition fees facing not £3,000, not £6,000, but in some cases £9,000 a year. Does it mean an enhanced service? No, we will receive a worse service and we will pay more for it. The gap between the privileged and the less privileged will widen as educational achievement and university degrees will become the main divider between the better financially placed. It is the difference between those who can buy their education and those who cannot. Education opportunities will return to be the gains and profits of the elite. What is this disgusting madness? Standing united, students plead with the government to save EMA. Our pleas have not been heard. The student lifeline that is EMA must be reinstated, it must be resurrected. We must stand to resist this constant assault on education, in solidarity with this, to preserve and protect the future. But it's not only about saving the students. We must defend jobs, and we must fight for the NHS, because the Tories are turning back the hands of time. Why? Because billions of pounds are being spent on warfare and not on welfare. And I, along with many students in this country, are being asked to pay the price of this war in Afghanistan. When students sign their fees checks, when we take on a loan for life, we have been robbed. We want to fund peace, not war. We want to ensure that schools, our education, our healthcare is funded. We do not want to be robbed anymore. As I said, they would turn back the hands of time. Terry Eagleton is right when he says, what we have witnessed in our own time is the death of universities as centres of critique. Since Margaret Thatcher, the role of academia has been to service the status quo, not challenge it in the name of justice, tradition, imagination, and the human welfare, the free play of the mind, or alternative visions of the future. We will change it by insisting that a critical reflection on human values and principles should be central to everything that goes on in universities. And this, all of this, is why the student movement is now more important than ever. It is up to us to demand a real education, an education of critique, of interrogating knowledge about the world around us, so that the next generation will challenge the government and stand fast to principles of freedom and equality, and play a part in student politics and student activism. This is our education. This is education. And we want a broad education, accessible for all, the poor and all communities. It's the task of the student activism to change the prevailing status quo, to challenge a status quo which has been demonised, particular communities on the grounds of colour, of race, ethnicity, and now people are being demonised because of their faith, and women are being criticised because of what they wish to wear. Without education, who is going to take a stand? So I appeal to you. We must learn from the young on the street, the kids in the square of Cairo in Tahrir Square, where Christian and Muslims together, shoulder to shoulder, have challenged the tyranny of Mubarak. But there are other tyrannies. The tyranny in our midst is not Mubarak, but the rising tide of hatred being directed against marginalised communities. The BNP gained 1 million votes last general election, with 2 members of European Parliament. What has happened to our world that the electorate votes for those whose policies peddle hatred and ideologies of supremacy based on genetics and race? We, as students, have bound together and become a real presence for a real force. We have become the buffer between the civil society and the state, and come face to face with the police and repressive tactics. We are subject to containment. They can cattle us like cattle, but we will challenge their right to do so. We will fight their violence, and we will fight their injustice. Kettling is not lawful. It is a false imprisonment. It is a breach of Article 5 of the European Convention of Human Rights, because it deprives us of our liberty and our freedom of movement. Even the court has held that such tactics could only be justified to prevent serious public disorder. We will not be defeated. We will continue with this struggle to express our opposition today, tomorrow, next week, next term, next year. Students must stand together, must remain strong to challenge the status quo in the name of democracy. It depends learning about the role of the West in world affairs, learning and developing the confidence to speak out and be counted, not to be silenced. We must have an education, and an education that challenges. This is our lifeblood. So march the streets on March 26th and dismantle the present government. The government must stop trying to beat us dry. There are too many of us, and we stand united. The principles of justice are cast in stone, not written in the sand. You, me, we stand together in solidarity with the kids in the square, in Egypt, Tunisia, Bahrain, the kids in Trafalgar Square, the kids everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Shadia. Where students go, others